Okay, I'm going to just talk to you for about 10 minutes or so. Feel free to keep drawing. As I was thinking yesterday, I have a PowerPoint. I'll only take about 15 minutes of your time. Oh, that's right. Keep wanting to step out without realizing I need to step in front. You know, I've been talking so much about the parallel between primary sources, the teacher guides. I realized I really needed to show that and to go into a little bit more depth. So I'm going to do 10 minutes and then Brenda will do another activity with you. And so we'll sort of juxtapose this. Because there's a lot of parallels and using primary source methodology and really using this in the classroom. When I say primary sources, and I know all teachers know this, but just for the audience and others, what am I referring to between a primary source and a secondary source? Yeah.
A primary source would be like a first-hand account of a historical event that took place.
Absolutely. When we're working with manuscripts and paintings, we're generally working with primary sources, documents and objects that were created during the time under study. So this has great parallels to what you're doing in the classroom. And as we've said all week, primary sources and the way that they're introduced, of course, we're introducing them into a secular classroom. So we're not debating whether they're true or not true or the veracity of them, but there's a way to really incorporate them in what you're doing. I'm arguing here that you can use multiple perspectives, issues of the past, and there's ways to actually analyze them. And you can actually use the tools I'm going to show you along with the art organizer, the cultural representation organizer, and the story map. If you're online on your phone or otherwise, I'm going to have you go to a website, but just so you know that using these tools along with the PEMM database, along with the art organizers and all the calligraphy and everything else that we're doing, these are some ways that you can actually promote student inquiry. Encouraging students to speculate about source, its creator and its context, which you would know depending upon what primary source. Sometimes that's alluded to in the database and other ways. You can inquire students what's happening during this time period. Those organizers that Brenda has developed help you do this. And in general, the tools I'll show you will have this kind of inquiry embedded in the primary source teacher guides. This is the website that if you can, this will be available to you in the resource section. But if you want to just put this in your phones, here's a great way to search for this though. If you don't want to type in that long address, loc.gov, you can go to Google and type in Library of Congress, primary sources, teachers or educators, and you will pull this up. And these are really incredibly helpful. And I think along with the organizers that Brenda has developed and offered to us, it'll even be more helpful. These guides, these tools, and you can also use them in conjunction with the PEMM database, also use what we call the methodology of observe, reflect, and question. They are incredibly helpful. So if you'll pull that up, you're going to a page. If you will click on, once you get to this page, what I want you to look at is the teacher's guides and analysis tools. Really extraordinarily helpful here. So if you'll click on that. Now let me just say, these guides and analysis tools can be used by both teachers and students. So it's both teacher and student facing. So you can see that the teacher's guides are broken down depending upon the type of primary source that you're using. Things that are developed, documents, objects, paintings, letters during the time under study. A secondary source is when a textbook talks about, refers to the primary source. The teacher's guides, you can see here, I don't have the web page. This is a static PowerPoint page. The first one here that I'm circling is a general primary source analysis tool, and we're going to take a look at what they actually look like. So this one will work with no matter what primary source. You go to the PEMM database, you pull up a painting, you pull up a manuscript, you know, you can use it and we'll see what it actually looks like. For other primary sources, there's, and in this tool, and we'll take a look at it, and if you're there, you can already click on it. They have wonderful questions, they have activities and all that built into the analysis guide as well as the tool. If you're looking at a book or a printed source, here's one specific for that. Here's one for analyzing charts and graphs. If I recall, and Wendy can help me out here, someone showed a picture of a map that someone had developed a map to show how how the manuscript was put together, the sacred text. It was a very simple mapping on how the pages were.
Flyer thing?
Yeah.
Yes, that was Jeremy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you have it, and you can see here, there's one for analyzing manuscripts. This one will be very specific to the PEMM database. Here's a great one for analyzing photographs and prints, analyzing political cartoons, sheet music, sound recordings, maps, motion pictures, newspapers, as well as histories. So what makes them so special? What's in these guides? And I could actually go to the source, and I may do that right now. I'm still on my PowerPoint. You'll see sample questions as well as activities. Here's one that's really hard to see. So what I may, Anya, end up doing after I show just the screenshot, I may actually log, because we already have it pulled up. I may actually log into a couple, and that way I can zoom in and out. Here's a still shot. If you're there, you can click on the PDF for the manuscripts. You can see the methodology, and I noticed various of you using it, asking students to identify and note details. That's where the organizers come in and serve, function so well. Sample questions, describe what you see. What do you notice first? How much of the text can you read? What does it say? Again, this is the use generally in a secular setting. What do you notice about the page? So forth. Then you have the reflect, encouraging students to generate or test hypotheses about the manuscript. Why do you think the manuscript was made? Who do you think created? For what purpose? What tools and materials were used to create it? What can you learn from examining this? If someone created something like this today, how would it be different? How might it be the same? And then observe, reflect, and the last area of the model is what? Observe, reflect, question. Just to make sure you're still with me. I'm going to let you get back to your fun stuff in just a moment. Reflection. Have students ask questions to lead more of observations and reflections. It's so small. I am definitely going to go to the website. And there are, under further investigation, help students to identify questions appropriate to further investigations and so forth. It gives you some follow-up activities here for beginning, advanced, as well as intermediate. Have students choose a section of the manuscript and put it in their own words. I think what I'm going to do, I am going to put this down, and I'm going to find our webpage, which is right here. Very good. Anya is such a genius in this.
I'm not sure if they are speaking it.
Yeah. They're not. They're being classrooms, so we'll have to change that. Okay, perfect. Yeah, this is a lot better. Again, you have the general one, but let's go to the one specific to manuscripts. You want to click on that with me? Now I can make this accessible. Here we go, perfect. Slide it around here. You see the observe, reflect, question, the further investigation, lots of great ideas here to use. Just moving some things around here so I can see them a bit better. Advance, examine a section of the manuscript, think about what you already know about this period in history. How does it support or contradict your current understandings of the period and so forth? I want to show you now, I'm going to, this can be downloaded, entire lesson here. Let's take a look at the general one. There's one just specific you can use with all primary sources. I don't think it is good as when you make it more specific to the type of primary source that you're using, but it's general. It still uses the same framework, asks you the basic questions. What are you observing? Reflecting, why do you think this is important? And so forth, and the questions and the activities here. Now, you can see you've got photographs and prints, political cartoons, music, sound recordings. Someone pick one of these categories and let's look inside. So this cartoons, political cartoons, lots of fun. Political cartoons. Oh, okay, wonderful. Let's open this up. What might you, and I'm going to leave this up, what might you want to draw students' eyes to observe about or reflect on? What? Yes.
So when I've done this before with my students, like one of the things we talked about is like, how would a photographer portray this versus the cartoonist? So I see that there's a question there that's very similar to that. Like, what do you see that looks different than it would in a photograph? I would definitely do that. But a lot of times like, they don't know what the things are that a cartoonist includes in order to make political figures or concept recognizable.
Okay, great, wonderful. Asking what's happening in the cartoon. Here's follow-up ideas here. Selecting a cartoon and going forth, it describes those activities there. So this gives you a sense on how helpful this can be along with the advanced organizers and using the primary sources from the PEMM database. Just wanted to. There wasn't any specific to painting. We have photography and other sort of visual things. But I thought there would be something here that also might be helpful in looking at some of the archival material. Again, here in terms of questioning, what are you wondering about, encouraging students to prioritize what's important, what's missing. And some of those questions are the same actually as some of the others, but there's some difference as well. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint, and I'm going to wrap up.
There, one on the right.
One on the right. Okay.
Helen, all the way.
Oh,
I'm not seeing it
wrong
anyway,
one.
so
Okay.
you need to stop sharing.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Just
I think it's that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up with this, but I want to just open it up to the online audience as well as folks that we have in front of us. Ways in which, have any of you ever used these tools before? How might you use them uh, along with the manuscripts in a secular classroom, or maybe in a non-secular classroom? What might be some issues there? So any ideas, any questions, any comments? Yes.
I think for the Ethiopic, manuscript specifically, maybe worth having something that's specifically at here. Where are they? How did they get here? And especially for the high school students, it might be worth having those tough conversations.
You mean the manuscript specifically, like how does the manuscript get?
Yeah, so there's a story, right? Yeah, where they still, yeah.
You know, here's an issue that I've been thinking about, and we will end on this, and maybe someone that has the online classroom can see if there's any comments or questions. And I'll put this out to our scholars here of the manuscripts. Because it seems as we're viewing them, a lot of times we're overlaying 21st century constructions of reality and our beliefs, you know, as an overlay on a lot of the manuscripts. Which if you're using the primary source guides, to some degree, they're asking you to do that. What are you observing? What's different? What might be the same? But how can you also ward against that? I mean, I've noticed us doing that. You know, we're thinking, oh, they're doing this, you know, in the manuscript, and we understand what that means to us through Western eyes, but that may not be exactly what was, you know, what was going on in the creator's mind or the creator's eye during the time. And I think, personally, I think we have to be very careful of that. But again, depends on, as we're using these tools, what are the outcomes that we are looking for? So understanding, as we're using the primary source tools, what is it that we want our students to take away from this, to learn, to understand, to better appreciate? Yeah.
I just was watching the news yesterday and they released the story about a very misleading story that spread really widely in the recent news cycle. So I just think these skills are so important for our students. Like we're hoping they transfer those then out into the world when they see story or see some information and it's not like, well, who made this? What was their purpose? You know, who's the audience here? Like, what are the questions I can ask to understand what's really going on? And I think that helps students get away from that modern perspective too that you were just talking about. If we ask them first, who made this? What was happening at the time? Then they're like already primed to be thinking that way.
Yeah.
So my thing is, it's a little bit of twofold, so we have to be careful of not going too far on either side. So the first thing is, there's a very complicated history of Ethiopic studies, and I do think that we do need to talk about it. That's my philosophy, and Professor Belcher, I'm sure will have more to say on that. So I like to put it up front. Here's, you know, the complicated history, let's, you know, acknowledge it. And then also we have to have a second conversation to say to students, don't be afraid of it. Because I think what happens a lot of the times is we tell people, look, you know, for the past however many centuries, Americans have ruined the African stories. And then people are like, well, then I'm not going to touch it, right? So we don't want that. And the third part, which is really what we have to think about is that we're putting it in a secular classroom. We have to allow kids to think. And sometimes when they're thinking, it will go outside of the tradition. But once we have that conversation with them and we're using it as a teaching tool, and this is me speaking from the tradition to myself and my fellow brothers, we have to acknowledge the fact that at some point in a classroom, it will deviate with that. And that's just the thinking process. We're not here to tell them, you know, this is the right answer. And we do that, and actually we're walking away from the education. So there's the three systems have to be balanced, in my view, which is a very kind of skillful dance.
Yeah, because this whole notion of observe, reflect and ask questions. We want students to think about their thinking. So if you're using this tool and you're asking students, well, what do you see? What's there? What's not there? Then we need to follow up and say, well, maybe you're asking them their thoughts about it and they say this, that, or the other. Then we should really respond, well, what makes you think so? What has informed your thinking? How did you arrive at that? Because I think it's valuable that students understand that what you're seeing and thinking about in the manuscript is really a reflection of your current environment and sort of westernized thinking. It's a reflection of your environment and what you've been taught. I think that's an important, valuable understanding, that because in the manuscript or the painting, the person is doing this or making this notion, we may think the notion is this, but I think it's important for students to think about it. Yeah, you had your hand up. I didn't.
It reminds me of cognitive behavioral therapy, which the base is to have some, to analyze your own thinking, right? You have to have some cognitive distance. So it requires some emotional distance a little bit to be able to analyze this type of text,
Right.
because of the emotions that will just naturally come up when we're talking about it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so
That's
that's an
a great-
idea versus
Exactly.
a narrative, what's happening, right? If you give them, then they can decide for themselves. That's ultimately, you want your students to also have the power, you're empowering them to think critically. And the responsibility, I guess, the weight is on that instructor to make sure what's being said, or all capacity, the whole facet of that which is present in all, whether it be hot topic or kind of, folks are like, oh, this is the history behind it. Is this, why not say it? Say it. Like, that narrative, I think what we all as educators want to, in some cases, there are stereotypical narratives that just continue to persist, right?
Right.
So then what do you as the educator then say about that? Don't disregard it, dismiss it, or put it away. You really need to also kind of include it in that teaching. And I think that's where the cognitive, like that, it's the weight on that instructor. And if the instructor is only as good as the tool they have, or how aware and
Or how willing they are to go those next steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this notion, we do want them to reflect, we want them to think about their thinking. Another term for that is metacognition. And that's really the undercurrent of, or the undercurrents of critical thinking. You had your hand up and I didn't want to over.
I just wanted to ask, Debbie, if you have an article or a video or something that you recommend that we can maybe share with students about some of the controversies about where manuscripts are? Okay, maybe you could share that with us, because I feel like if, to kind of have that conversation as we're looking at these primary sources, it would be really nice to have given some students here.
So I have a YouTube video on this, on specifically Ethiopian studies. I also have a second book on for the youth, but I have one specific chapter that I think would highlight some of the issues within Ethiopian studies.
I saw a hand in the back.
To follow up on that, would it be possible for you or the rest of the experts to speak to us by tomorrow? Is there time where you could talk to us a little bit? Because I, for one, would be very grateful to hear from you all on this, so that I am more informed when I go to my students.
And part of what we're talking about, to some degree, falls under the overall rubric of how to, not that this is controversial, but in our current environment with critical race theory and all of this, how to teach about maybe controversial topics, not that it's controversial, but I do think it's important as we teach about these things to note that, that from a Western perspective or other perspectives, there's bias, there's ethnocentrism, where people look on things and they perceive that they're this or that because they're looking through a certain cultural lens. And I think that's valuable for students to know that they see through a certain lens. they understand the world through a certain lens and they may not know that much about Africa. I was sharing with my colleagues over there before I got a PhD, I started out as a social studies teacher and a health science teacher. And my husband was at the high school. He was a guidance counselor and I was a social studies teacher. I had my own kids in the classroom. Can you believe that? They allowed it. But I was always very much interested in social justice. So as he's guiding me, I want you to focus here. I want you to talk about this in your classroom. And then he goes, oh, Africa, don't worry about that. Not much is happening there. I stopped. Something clicked in my head. I said, you know what? I'm going to teach a whole lot about Africa. And so I did. And, during African American History Month, I talked about African American history and African history. And it was such a hit. And it all went high school. That the same principal came up to me, to his credit, and said, Helen, I'd like for you to do this all year. That was then, boy, it's really a different environment now. But I think there are some ideas and principles regarding teaching for social justice and using an anti-racial lens, using a more global human rights lens that needs to really to be considered here as well. A lot of times I know teachers, and I'm going to end with this, one of the things you can do with these primary source guides and other ways is to watch out for bias and misinformation. And then ask students, well, you said this, well, why did you say that? How did you come up with that answer? How did you arrive from A to B? And that helps them sort of uncover, hidden forms of bias, which, you don't leave at the schoolhouse door once you enter, you take it in. So I think teaching these sacred texts can illuminate the history of Africa, the diaspora, and so many other things that you can teach if you're intentional about it. So I think that's important.
I was gonna say, I feel like a Socratic seminar, like in read discussion where they can hash out those questions about well, what are the sort of reasons for one group having control of resources? What would be in the right next to the moral and the ethics? They can kind of let them discuss with framing questions. I feel like the hardest part is setting a tone where people can listen and be heard and respected. But when you do that, you can really get to the heart of the topic.
Absolutely, coming up with some ground rules, talking to students prior to having a discussion like this about perspective taking when people disagree. You're not, in a secular classroom, you're not teaching religion per se. You're teaching how to think about things, how to, analyze and so there's a lot you can do here. And so I'm going to stop now because Brenda and Vanessa, they have a wonderful activity. But thank you so much for your ideas, and we're looking forward to the rest of the day. And thank you to our online group. By the way, are there any questions or comments? Anya, Wendy, Vanessa in our online classroom? Our students online, are
Chat
there
or Q&A.
the Q&A or chat?
Yes,
Is
I'm
there one?
responding
Because
to
I
it.
can't see it from
Asking for
here.
Dawid's article or YouTube video, which we will send shortly.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that our online audience had a voice.
The only online question is to get David's article. Yeah, that's being done. Yeah, okay.
So this activity, which we're probably not actually going to do, but I'm just going to, show it to you. Given we're at the end of the day, we've had a lot of art practice, but it connects to the calligraphy and some of the art that we were talking about. So we came up with, embedded it with Wendy, did something called the vocabulary choir. What that would be what? What would you think of vocabulary choir, to use the word that Jeremy introduced us yesterday? Does anybody know what a choir is? Am I saying that correctly, Wendy?
They were like the little booklets.
It's a little booklet.
side.
Yeah, so here's the idea. In your folder, you have in your resource, and for your people online, it's in the resource folder online. You will have a list of vocabulary words, and you will have some images related to those vocabulary words. So there are the images you see here, and then the list of vocabulary words. Okay, so when we were thinking of a way to kind of engage students with the vocabulary. When I'm going to ask students to do something, I always am going to do it myself first. I think that's a good practice because you can figure out all the problems and where you're going to fail. Okay, so here's my failure or beginning. So I thought, okay, I want to create a vocabulary choir, and I used a 5x7 card, and I wanted to use one that had lines on it because I thought, okay, sorry, stand here. I'm going to make a better one, but I'm going to make a better one. But I want to have a practice one. So this is my practice one. And having the lines here, I thought would help me, so it's not all over the place. Okay, so then my vocabulary word was Aksum. And you can rest assured that I did not do what's on the front. Later when I came in and showed it to Aleme, he did the little miniature hurrah down here for me. And then inside I wrote the definition. So we're not asking students even to look up the definition because the definitions are right on that sheet of paper. What we're asking them to do, because we're talking about calligraphy, is some beautiful writing. And beautiful writing to me means the best writing that you can do. So I wrote my definition. Aksum was the second oldest Christian nation in the world, located in the highlands in the 1st to 8th. And I made a big mistake because I wrote not really thinking BCE. Well, then when I went back and looked, oh, that's not correct. So you see how I corrected my mistake? I put a cross over the B. And then I did try to draw one of the steles from Aksum. And so this is my beginning. So then I thought, let me try. I have a niece who's going in the 7th grade. Let me see how she does with this activity. We couldn't work it out so that I was actually with her. So I gave a packet for my niece to give to her. And then we talked a little bit on the phone. So I learned some things doing it that way. So here's hers, and her word is, if you can see it, cherub. So she loved, when she was looking at the images, she loved a cherub, and she hadn't heard that word before. What is it? She wrote her definition, which is on the paper. A baby angel who protects and appeals to God on someone's behalf. This girl is quite, I think, going to be an artist, although it's kind of sideways. Isn't that's a nice drawing of an angel.
But you can see it from different angles.
Yeah, there you go.
Depending on
Different angles. And she did her, at that time, I haven't worked on my Harag geometric well enough. So we talked about the colors, and sometimes in many of the manuscripts, you'll just see that they have bands of color. And so that was her work. Then I gave it to my art teacher friend, and she has been working on a sample to show you. And so what I have actually, I'm not sure I have enough, but I'm going to pass these around. And your job is to fold it and make it a choir, which is going to be very easy. And here it is. She chose the word abbot and put her definition in, and then she drew an abbot. I think she probably not only looked at the art sheet, but then she went on and actually, because you can click on the links and it will take you to the manuscript. As much as I could for the definitions, I used things that were in the PEMM database, but sometimes it wasn't there, so I went outside. So I'm just going to pass these, ask Vanessa to help me pass these around. So you can make your choir. And then if you want to, while you're home tonight, or you can come in the morning, you can pick, I would suggest you pick a vocabulary word from the list. And you know, just write the definition. If you want to decorate it or anything, that's fine, but let's see how it works when you bring it back tomorrow.
Everybody gets one or two? One or two per person?
Huh?
One or two per person?
What, just whatever they want, yeah, yeah. So, questions? Any thoughts that you might have about this activity? Yes.
No, I just, thank you for providing this. I just think it's great. I feel like I'm doing vocabulary all day long, all the time, and always looking for ways to make it interesting and engaging and like a little bit deeper than, you know, the other right now. So I think this is like a great.
And that's all I have for today. Is there anything else we need to, except of course, we want you to fill out the exit card when you're leaving today, you know, what worked, what could we do better? Any other comments that you want to make? Anything else, Vanessa?
Have people in the chat write their evaluation.
Yes,
Online, right in the chat.
your online, please write your evaluation in the chat.
They can keep these.
Yes. Now, if is there anyone that didn't get one of the one of Abbott, let me know, because I have a few of
I
another.
still have
part.
two left in case someone didn't get it.
Did everybody get one?
I think everyone got one.
And I think it's good for students to see like the non-professional example, as well as the art teacher who can raise it to a whole another level.
Yeah. Where are the indexes?
They're right.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And we have 29 words and there's a 30 there, number 30. That's what word that I might have missed that you think would be important, and you can write it in and maybe share that with us tomorrow too. Maybe that's the word you want to look up and create your flyer about. Thanks to everybody online. We're almost at the end of the day. Thank you for coming. I hope you'll come back tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow is right. Is not, it's only for the in-person. So thank you for being with us, for engaging with with the presenters, and stay with us. Stay connected. Thank you. Tomorrow.
Only in person. Only one in person. Yeah. Even today was.